So the purpose of this video lesson is to teach you how to cite evidence. And citing evidence is a pretty complex skill because not only do you need to know how to find the right evidence, but then you need to know how to word it. So there are 3 techniques to citing evidence. You can directly quote, you can paraphrase, or you can summarize. When you paraphrase and summarize, they go in your own words. But summarize really steps out and it looks at the main idea. And when you paraphrase, it keeps details. But again, both of those are in your own words. No matter what technique you use, you need to include parenthetical citations, or in other words, the page number. And the format of that would be in parentheses, the author's last name. Let's say it's Divergent by Veronica Roth, and then the page number. If you don't have page numbers, you could do line numbers, like if it's line 23 through 25. Notice the period always goes at the end. You don't need to say the word page or the word line. You're just going to go ahead and write it in. Okay, so now that you know there are 3 different types of techniques for citing evidence, it's time to talk about how to do that. Now in your paper, you want to use a variety of techniques. You don't just want to directly quote every time. You don't just want to summarize every time, or else it'll feel like you don't have specific enough information. So it's really important to find a balance. So, of course, when citing evidence, the first thing you need to do is figure out what you're proving. And so that should come from your thesis. So I'm going to imagine that I'm pulling the first point of a thesis, which is going to be the theme of Divergent is people are multifaceted and complex beings. So this is the topic sentence of my body paragraph. And so now I need to find 3 pieces of evidence to prove this topic sentence. Now when I'm thinking about this, I've got to start thinking about in the book where I can prove this. And sometimes it makes sense to look for details in the beginning of your book and the end. And it just depends what detail you're trying to prove. So I know I need 3 supporting details, so I'm going to start looking. And as I look through the book Divergent, I came across the very beginning of the book, and this is where Tris Pryor gets the results back from her aptitude test. And the aptitude test is supposed to tell her whether or not she should stay in abnegation or she should be in another category, which is essentially the category group of people they live with. And so the test is supposed to give them one answer. But as we find out, and let me see if I can kind of put this up closer for you. As we find out, her test actually tells her she is abnegation, dauntless, and erudite. And so this is really confusing to her, and this is when she learns she is divergent, hence the title. So I definitely want to include this because in this society, they tell everyone they're just a part of one group. And I'm trying to prove that people are multifaceted and complex and that they don't fall into one category. So I'm going to go ahead and put this as a supporting detail here. So I'm going to get my transition, for example. And then let's go ahead and directly quote first. So, and it's really up to you which technique you want to use. Sometimes if it's really, really juicy, I want to directly quote it. So I'll say, for example, I'll say Tori gives Tris her aptitude test results back, comma, stating that she is, here's my quote, abnegation, comma, dauntless, comma, and erudite. I pulled that directly from the text. So I'm going to end my quote. This quote was found on page 22, and Veronica Roth is my author. So in parentheses, I'm going to put Roth, author's last name, and then the page number 22, and my parentheses, and end with a period. Please notice that I did not just put the whole sentence, because the whole sentence was actually, is that you display equal aptitude for abnegation, dauntless, and erudite. I didn't put that whole sentence. I started to integrate the quote into my own writing, and I just pulled part of it. By doing that, I can introduce the quote, and I can also set myself up for a really good explanation. Because your evidence can't stand alone, I have to circle back and prove to the reader how this piece of evidence proves my topic sentence. So if you're not scoring well on citing evidence, it's probably, one big reason is probably because of your explanation. So I have Tori gives Tris her aptitude test results back, stating that she is abnegation, dauntless, and erudite. So I did a direct quote. Now I'm going to try to explain how this supports. So I could say clearly, comma, Tris doesn't fit into one faction like her society says she's supposed to. Period. So right here is my explanation. I'm circling back to what I'm trying to prove, and then here is my direct quote. So that's an example of how I would directly quote. Now let's say I wanted to paraphrase this. I could say, Tori gives Tris her aptitude test results back, telling her that she has fit into all 3 categories of society, or 3 out of the 5 categories of society, being erudite, dauntless, and abnegation, period. And then I would still say Roth 22, but this time I kind of changed the order here so I wouldn't directly quote. Or I could summarize, and I could say, for example, Tris learns that she has fit into 3 factions of her society instead of just 1, period. By saying that, I am summarizing the main idea, but I'm not actually listing what the factions are. So when you cite evidence, the biggest thing I want you to remember is you are trying to prove your topic sentence, your point from your thesis. And you need how many details? That's right. You need 3 supporting details to prove that. And you want to give a good variety of directly quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. And no matter what, you want to include your parenthetical citation. The only reason you would not include your parenthetical citation is if you include it in your body paragraph. Like if I say something like, in addition, on page 40, comma, and then I go into my citation. Maybe this time I paraphrase and explain, but because I put the page number and cite it, I do not need my parenthetical citation. So now it's time to go into your writing and start to prove those points that you worked really hard on selecting. Good luck.